Happy Monday, girls. I hope you all are doing wonderful. I hope you are staying safe and healthy. I hope your first week at school last week went great. If you need anything from Girls Inc., let myself know or Miss Courtney know. Also, we are doing homework help. And so if you need help with your homework, just let one of us know and we will set up a date and time. So today is Music Monday with Miss Ashley. Woo woo. So I am very excited about today's activity. Today we will be talking about whales and do a little artsy whale activity at the end. So you're kind of wondering, what does whales have to do with music? And so, much like humans, whales like to communicate with each other and they like to socialize. And one way they socialize is by being in what is called pods. And so that's kind of like their own little family. And so, like, as humans, we like to travel together. So that's kind of like our pods, or be with our family and friends. And we also like to communicate with each other, and we communicate with each other in different ways. We like to communicate through facial expressions, through letters, through social media, the phone. Also, we like to communicate through art, through poetry, through music, and through sound. And so whales, they communicate strictly through sounds. And some people might say it's kind of like they sing. And three ways they communicate is through click noises, through whistle noises, and pulse calls. And so let's talk about at least two of those three. Clicks. And so whales, they do make click noises, like I mentioned. And that is a way for them to navigate. And so you might be wondering, what is navigation? And so navigation is a way for them to travel, to move around. Humans, we have our cell phones, we have maps, or we have compasses to communicate. But for whales, they use strictly noises or sounds. And so the clicks, they're able to project that noise, or they're able to make that noise, and that noise will bounce off objects. And so through that sound, they will know how big or how small that object is, which is really, really cool and interesting. Not only can they tell how big a object is by making this click noise, they can also use this noise to determine if they are surrounded or near a friendly creature or a predator, which is not so friendly. So that would help them stay tuned and stay alert and be safe and be really safe. And so with whistle and impulses, I know I'm going to talk about two, but with whistle and impulses, this is more for them to socialize more. And we're not going to talk about whistles that much today, but we're going to talk about pulse calls. And so pulse calls are used more are used often. And as humans, if we hear that noise, so let's say if I played a video for you right now, which I'm not, but if I played a video for you and we got to hear that pulse call, it would sound more like a squeak or scream to us, to the human ear. But to whales or other whales, is a way for them to communicate with each other and really determine if they're with their pod, or to stay with their pods, or to see if they're around a stranger, right? And so it's type of dialect. And so you might hear me talk and you might like, she sounds a little country. Especially if I went up north, they're probably like, she's a little country, so they might know I'm from down south. But with other whales, they're probably like, oh, they're part of this pod, or oh, they're part of my pod. So they get familiar with each other. So that's a little bit more about their sounds. But there's another thing that whales do, which is really cool. They like to use their fins and their tails. And you're probably like, what do they use their fins and their tails for? They make sounds with their fins and their tails above the surface of the water to communicate non-verbally. And so you're probably like, what is non-verbal? Non-verbal is basically if I stop talking and I start making noises with my hands. Maybe I do this. I'm beating on the table, or I snap my fingers, that's a nonverbal response. But if I sing something, then that's a verbal what? That is verbal communication. So basically speaking is verbal, or the whales making the sounds with the whistles or the pulse calls or the clicks. That is more the verbal, but nonverbal is the whales using their tails and their fins. And when they make that noise above the surface, it would go 100 meters down. 100 meters is a quite long way, so it can reach the surface. It's to keep them safe. And then also it's kind of like I said, it's to keep them safe, but it's like a warning sign for the other whales, and it helps get rid of like the fish that surround for them. It's called schools of fish, so like a group of fish around them. So that is really awesome. And so I hope you learned some really cool things about whales and them singing or using verbal or nonverbal communication sounds or music. And if you want to do some research, go ahead. I'm not a pro at this. I really have fun learning about whales myself. If you want to share what you learned about whales and you learned something different from what I told you, go ahead, share that with me. I'd be happy to hear about your research and what you learned about whales. But let's get started on our activity. And so when I thought about this activity, I thought about you all, because I've seen you do it at Girls Inc., which is really awesome. Because I went up to the table before and I'm like, what are you all doing? And you all called them squishies. And so we're going to make a whale squishy, or in this case, a whale sculpture. And with our whale sculpture, you're going to need construction paper. It can be blue. If you want to make a purple whale, a pink whale, go ahead. Make it unique, make it fun. And you're going to need you're going to need 2 pieces of construction paper. And then you're going to need scraps of paper. So it might have been something that you wrote on that you can just wad up and put inside. And then you're going to need scissors. You're going to need glue or stapler. And you're going to need a marker or pencil. Okay, so I'm going to get started. I'm going to need both hands, so I'm going to stop in between and show you all my results of what we're doing. But before we do that, I'm going to show you a picture of what we're doing, because some of you may have done this and made squishies or a sculpture, and some of you may have not. So I'm going to show you the page of what it kind of looks like of what we're doing. So let's get started, girls. So girls, the first thing you need to do is draw your whale. I actually freehand mine, so it does not look perfect, but that's okay. If you want to freehand yours, you can, or you can trace a whale. You can print something off, or some of you have used an iPad and traced. It's kind of hard to trace with construction paper, but if you use like white construction paper or line paper, you can trace from an iPad or different things like that, or a computer if you have one. I would say if you're tracing from an iPad or computer, please use a pencil, not a marker. I'm going to cut mine, and when you're cutting, I'm actually using 2 different blues. I'm going to use I'm using a light blue and a dark blue. So when you're cutting, please cut both at the same time, so you don't have to go back and cut the second. So I went on and cut out my whale, and before I cut it out, of course, you've seen that I already drew on the face. I thought that would be easier for me, so I won't have to draw on it after it's stuffed with all my scraps of paper. But after you cut that out, grab your glue stick. Like I said, you can use a stapler, you can use liquid glue, or you can use a glue stick. I would say, honestly, the best way is to use a glue stick. Liquid glue would take too long to dry, and staples, you want to be safe. So I would say a glue stick is best. And what you're going to do, you're going to glue around the edges, but do not glue. I would say stop right there. So just glue down and leave the open space kind of where the eyes and mouth are. so you can stuff the paper in it. But you're gonna want to put a good amount of glue on the outside. So just don't put a little thin layer or make it really thin. You're gonna make it one pretty thick, as you can see, if I can get my camera right, as you see, so it can stick. Because the middle, you don't have to worry about the tail being stuffed, but you want the middle to be really stuffed, okay? So it can be all squishy and look like a sculpture. So let's start gluing. So girls, I have my whale glued together. And so if I were you, I will let it set and dry for a little bit. But make sure you have an opening right here, like I mentioned, and just grab some pieces of paper. All right, girls. So this is the finished product of my whale. I think it looks really cool. I know it looks like a fish, but if it looks like a whale, better. But make it fun, make it unique. This kind of looks white, but it is light blue. And then I flipped it, and guess what? It is dark blue on this side. I did not make a face on this side, but I think I'm going to do that. But if you want to make it a colorful whale, go on and color it before you glue it together or stuff it with paper, because that will be the greatest. And also make sure you let it dry before you play with it. And so it's going to be very squishy. And you can add as much paper as you want it, but the bigger the well is, the more paper you can add. And the smaller the well is, the less paper you have to add. So just remember that, because you're going to want to close it really good. And so have fun with this. I hope you learned a lot about whales. And so just show me your finished product. I hope you all have fun. And if you learn more about whales, share it with me, girls. You all have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. And also, I want to know how school is going, so share that with me. Bye, girls.